The awakening the galaxy had known peace for centuries. The great wars that once shook the universe were now nothing more than stories told by the old ones. The stars glistened brightly, and each corner of the galaxy was in its place. But in the farthest reaches, far beyond the known universe, something stirred in the deep, empty space of the outer rim. Hidden from the eyes of all lay an ancient warship. It was enormous, older than anything the galaxy had ever seen. For centuries it lay dormant, forgotten by time and history. It was a legend, a myth whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. They said it was a relic from the old human civilization, a ship so powerful that its mere presence could change the fate of the stars themselves. And now that ship was waking up. The ship's lights flickered on, one by one, deep inside its belly. Massive engines, long, silent, began to hum with life. The stars around it seemed to tremble as the ship slowly powered up. Its systems came online, and the once dim metal surface of the ship began to shine, reflecting the light of distant stars in the heart of the galaxy. Far from this ancient ship, the leaders of the greatest factions in the universe were going about their usual business. The United Alliance, a group of powerful races and civilizations, gathered in their meeting chambers. Their heads of state discussed trade agreements and military strategy, each race ensuring their hold on the galaxy. They did not know that their fate was about to change. Back on the warship, a deep, rumbling sound echoed through its empty halls. The ship was alive again. It had not been used in millennia, but now its purpose was clear. Its weapons powered up, ready for a fight no one expected. The warship had come back to life, and its intentions were unknown. On the bridge, where once human commanders had stood, the lights flickered on, but there were no humans to command it now. Only an automated system designed to follow commands, yet with a mind of its own, began to read the data from the sensors. The system detected the ship's surroundings, calculating its path. It had been given a mission long ago, but now that mission had begun again. From the depths of space, a signal was sent out. The warship's first transmission in ages reached the nearest galaxy stations. A warning, a sign. The signal wasn't loud. It wasn't even a normal frequency. But those who were listening, those who still paid attention to the forgotten corners of the galaxy, felt the disturbance. Back at the Alliance headquarters, a young officer working late noticed the strange signal. At first, it seemed like just another interference, something caused by a comet or a passing asteroid. But something about the signal felt different. It felt important. He quickly notified his superior officer, who dismissed it as an error. But the young officer was not so sure. He sent the data to higher officials, his mind racing. What if this wasn't just a glitch? What if this signal was a warning? Before the officer could investigate further, an alarm blared. A fleet of ships had appeared on the edge of their galaxy, not belonging to any known race or faction. They weren't even using a known form of propulsion. The ships were massive and old, ancient even. And at the center of it all was the warship. It loomed over the rest of the fleet, towering with its overwhelming size and power. The officer's heart raced as he stared at the image on the screen. He had never seen anything like it. It was clear now that the galaxy was not ready for this. They had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to fear the unknown. But the warship's arrival had shaken that illusion. The calm of the galaxy was shattered, and with it, the peace that had reigned for centuries. The warship began to move. Slowly at first, its engines barely humming as it made its way toward the heart of the galaxy. Each movement felt deliberate, as though the ship itself had a purpose. As the ship approached, the surrounding space seemed to distort. Stars flickered and wavered, their light dimming as if the warship's very presence bent the laws of nature. Across the galaxy, leaders began to take notice. News spread quickly. An ancient warship, far older than any known race, was heading straight toward them. Panic began to set in. No one knew what the ship wanted, but one thing was clear: nothing would be the same after today. The ancient warship, once a legend, had awakened from its long slumber. The universe, once calm and peaceful, now stood on the brink of chaos, and no one was ready for what was coming next. A new force in the galaxy. The warship's arrival was unlike anything anyone had seen before. The massive vessel continued its journey through the galaxy, its purpose unknown but undeniably powerful. It moved slowly but deliberately, as if every inch of its path had been planned long ago. There was no stopping it now. The galaxy's defenses, once considered impenetrable, were now useless against this force from the past. The galaxy's leaders had no choice but to respond. The United Alliance, which had once been united in peace, now found itself split. Some leaders called for immediate action and attack to destroy the warship before it could reach the heart of the galaxy. Others urged caution, suggesting they try to communicate, to understand what the warship wanted. But no one could agree, and time was running out. The warship's engines hummed as it passed the outer rim. It sent shockwaves of energy through nearby systems, scrambling communications, disabling weapons, and leaving entire fleets powerless in its wake. It was as if the ship itself had a mind that wanted to make its presence known. Its very appearance felt like a storm that had come to tear down everything in its path. At the Alliance's headquarters, there was chaos. The once calm control rooms were filled with hurried voices and flashing alarms. Officers scrambled to understand what was happening, trying to analyze the ship's movements, but nothing seemed to make sense. No one had any answers. All they knew was that this warship had to be stopped before it reached the core of the galaxy. However, a quiet voice stood out in the midst of the panic. The young officer who had first noticed the signal from the warship, Lieutenant Erin, now stood before the higher-ups, trying to make them see the bigger picture. He wasn't sure why, but something told him this was more than just an invasion. "We need to understand this ship before we make our move," Erin urged. "It's not like anything we've ever seen. If we attack without knowing its intentions, we could make things worse." The higher-ups didn't share his optimism. "We don't have time for diplomacy," one of them replied sternly. "That ship could be a weapon, and we can't afford to wait around while it destroys everything we've built." Erin, however, felt there was something different about this ship. His gut told him it wasn't just a warship. It was part of something bigger, something that had been forgotten in time. Meanwhile, the warship continued its journey toward the core. Its massive silhouette cast a shadow over nearby planets, creating a strange sense of dread wherever it passed. The ship's exterior gleamed under the distant light of nearby stars, and yet its advanced technology was unlike anything anyone could comprehend. Back at the Alliance's command center, scientists and engineers were scrambling to study the strange energy signals coming from the warship. A group of them worked feverishly, trying to unlock its secrets. They discovered that the ship had been dormant for thousands of years, yet its systems were still functional. It was like a time capsule, a ship that had survived the fall of entire civilizations. As the warship drew closer, the tension on the Alliance's flagship increased. The crew was on high alert, unsure whether the warship was heading for an attack or simply passing through. The vastness of space offered no clear answers, only uncertainty. The universe had never faced a threat like this before, and then it happened. A transmission from the warship. The message was cryptic, barely understandable, but its meaning was clear. A single sentence echoed through the galaxy. Humanity has returned to reclaim its place. The galaxy fell silent. The message sent ripples of shock through the galaxy's leaders. What did it mean? Humanity had disappeared from the galaxy long ago. Their colonies were thought to be lost. Were these the descendants of those long lost? Humans? Or was this a trap? A threat from a race that had somehow survived the centuries? The question remained unanswered, but one thing was certain. The return of humanity was not something the galaxy was prepared for. The warship's message was like a spark to dry tinder. All across the galaxy, factions began to rally. Some prepared for war, others for peace. But no one knew what would happen next. Lieutenant Erin, still convinced that understanding the warship was key, gathered a small group of officers and scientists. Together, they began to decode the warship's message. The young officer felt that the fate of the galaxy depended on this one mission. If they could learn the truth behind humanity's return, they could stop whatever was coming. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. The Alliance was divided. Leaders across the galaxy took sides. The warship, still on its course, was now the center of all attention. It had already begun to disrupt the galaxy's fragile peace, but it wasn't just the ship that threatened everything. It was the force behind it, the force that had awakened after so long, and the questions that no one had answers for. As the warship neared its final destination, the tension between the galaxy's factions grew. Each faction was preparing for the worst, hoping to outlast the others. And as the warship's final approach began, Lieutenant Erin's team uncovered one final piece of the puzzle. The warship was not just a weapon, it was a message. Humanity's return wasn't about conquering the galaxy, it was about reclaiming what was lost. But who would stand in their way? The human agenda. The warship had entered the galaxy's core, and its presence had shaken everything to its foundation. The once unified galaxy was now a battleground of uncertainty. Factions were choosing sides, and leaders scrambled to prepare for the unknown. The mystery of the ship's origins and the cryptic message it had sent humanity has returned to reclaim its place. Reverberated through the galaxy, the United Alliance, still unsure of the warship's true purpose, had sent an envoy to negotiate with the human descendants. Lieutenant Erin, who had been studying the ship and its transmissions, had insisted on being part of the delegation. He believed that there was more to this situation than a simple military threat. He had to know the truth. The envoy traveled in a fleet of sleek ships, carefully approaching the warship's enormous shadow that loomed over the galaxy. As they came closer, Erin's thoughts raced. He had read the data on the warship for days, and although the power of its weaponry was undeniable, he couldn't shake the feeling that the ship itself was only part of a larger plan. What if humanity wasn't returning to conquer? What if they had come to save the galaxy? As the envoy's ships docked with the warship, a silence fell over the crew. Erin and the others stepped onto the dark, cold metal surface of the warship's docking bay. The air inside felt thick, like something ancient and powerful had been locked away for far too long. The room was dimly lit by a soft, pulsing light emanating from the walls. It was as though the ship was alive, watching them as they moved. A door at the far end of the bay slid open, and a figure emerged. At first, Aaron thought it was another officer from the human faction, but as the figure stepped into the light, he realized it was different. This was no ordinary person. The figure was tall and commanding, their face stern but with an air of wisdom that could only come from centuries of experience. The person was dressed in dark, weathered armor that seemed to be a part of the ship itself. The figure introduced themselves as Commander Selene, leader of the human forces aboard the warship. Their voice was deep and calm, with an authority that made everyone listen. "Lieutenant Aaron," Commander Selene said, her eyes locking onto his. "You've come to ask why we've returned. You've come to question our purpose." Aaron nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. He had so many questions about humanity's disappearance, their return, and the warship's true purpose. "Humanity was lost to the stars long ago," Selene continued, her voice echoing through the cold chamber. "We have watched the galaxy grow and evolve, but the peace you found, it is fragile. The galaxy is teetering on the edge of chaos, and we are here to restore balance." Aaron's heart raced. The weight of her words settled in his chest. What was she saying? Were they here to help or to dominate? "You speak of balance," Aaron said cautiously, "but your warship is a weapon. It could destroy everything in its path. How can we trust that humanity's return isn't just a new kind of conquest?" Selene's expression didn't change. "You don't need to trust us yet, Lieutenant," she replied. "But you will. Humanity was the galaxy's first hope, and we will be its last. What you call peace is nothing more than a temporary illusion. The galaxy needs a strong hand, one that will ensure true stability." Aaron felt a chill. The galaxy's peace had always been built on fragile alliances, with constant negotiations between countless factions. He knew that, but to hear it from a commander of humanity felt different. This wasn't about gaining control, it was about rebuilding a system that had been lost. But at what cost? The commander continued, revealing a startling truth. The galaxy is threatened by forces beyond your understanding. There are ancient powers hidden in the dark corners of space forces that you've ignored. But we remember, we know what's coming, and we're here to prepare you. Aaron felt a sense of unease growing inside him. He had seen enough to know that these weren't just empty threats. The galaxy's peace was fragile, but there was something more. The warship had come for a purpose. Humanity wasn't here to destroy. They were here to protect. But in doing so, they might dismantle everything the galaxy had fought for. The silence in the docking bay grew heavy. The members of the envoy were all exchanging glances, unsure of what to say. They had come hoping for answers, but what they had received only raised more questions. Commander Selena's gaze softened as she looked at Aaron. "You still don't understand, do you? Humanity doesn't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to unite it. We want to bring the factions together, under one banner, one vision." Aaron felt a wave of realization crash over him. Was this what humanity had always envisioned for the galaxy? A unified force, stronger together, under one rule. The thought was overwhelming, and yet it made a strange kind of sense. The galaxy had been divided for too long, but was unification worth the cost? He turned to Selene, his voice barely a whisper. "And if we refuse, what happens then?" "Then you will witness the true power of humanity," she said, her tone now cold, "and the galaxy will either fall in line, or it will fall apart." As the words hung in the air, the tension became unbearable. Eren knew then that the galaxy had two choices: either join the humans and accept their vision of unity, or fight to keep the galaxy's fragile peace. Knowing that the warship's power was enough to destroy everything they had worked for, the future of the galaxy was now in their hands, and the stakes had never been higher. The final confrontation, the galaxy was at a breaking point. In every corner of the universe, whispers of humanity's return spread like wildfire. Factions that had once been at peace were now preparing for war. The warship, a towering symbol of humanity's power, had moved closer to the heart of the galaxy, and its presence was felt by all. The message was clear. Humanity had returned to restore order, but at what cost? Lieutenant Eren stood on the observation deck of the Alliance's flagship, gazing out at the stars. The space before him was filled with a fleet of ships, each one ready to fight or negotiate. His mind raced with the questions that had haunted him ever since he had first encountered Commander Selene. Was humanity truly here to save the galaxy, or were they simply the harbingers of a new era of control? As the warship approached, Eren knew the time for diplomacy was running out. The negotiations had failed. The galaxy's leaders had gathered in a desperate bid to find a solution, but the fear and distrust between them were palpable. The peaceful factions were unsure if they could trust the humans, and the more militant races saw the warship as a direct threat. The universe had become a powder keg, and humanity's return had struck the match. The tension was unbearable. Every faction had their own plan. Some leaders believed that the only way to prevent disaster was to destroy the warship before it could reach the galaxy's core. Others, like Eren, still believed there was a chance for peace if they could find a way to understand humanity's true intentions. On the warship, Commander Selene stood on the bridge, watching the approach of the Alliance's forces. Her expression was calm, but deep inside, she knew the outcome of this confrontation would determine the fate of the galaxy. Humanity had come back to take their rightful place, but they had not expected the resistance to be so fierce. The galaxy's unity was fragile, too fragile to survive the coming storm. Her second in command, Captain Dragon, approached her, his face tight with concern. "Commander, the Alliance is closing in. They will attack if we don't make our intentions clear. What are your orders?" Selene paused, her gaze fixed on the vast expanse of space outside. "Prepare for a defensive stance, but do not fire unless necessary. This is our last chance to show them that we're not here to destroy, but to lead." "Understood," Dragon replied, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. He knew the warship's power. If the galaxy refused to cooperate, there was no telling what they might do. Meanwhile, the Alliance's fleet was preparing for what could be the most decisive battle in the galaxy's history. Eren stood in the command room, his heart pounding. As the final orders were given, he had no illusions about the coming fight. The warship was more powerful than anything they had ever faced, and if they didn't succeed, the galaxy would be lost to humanity's vision of unification whether they liked it or not. The countdown began. A massive wave of energy shot out from the warship's engines, rippling through space and sending a shockwave that rattled the fleet. It was a warning. Humanity wasn't backing down. But then, something unexpected happened. The warship halted. Its advance, its immense size looming over the fleet, but it did not fire. Instead, Selene's voice echoed through the comms, calm and resolute. "We do not wish to destroy you. We wish to bring the galaxy into a new era of peace. But if you resist, the price will be high." The silence that followed was deafening. Eren couldn't believe his ears. The warship was offering peace. Was it possible that humanity truly sought unity, or was this just another ploy to gain control? The tension in the room was thick, but Erin saw the faces of the other officers. They didn't know what to do. If they attacked, they would risk everything, and if they didn't, the galaxy might fall under humanity's rule. Suddenly, the fleet's commander, General Corrin, gave the order, "Engage. We cannot let this ship take control of the galaxy." The warship's defenses immediately activated, and the sky lit up with blinding light as weapons fire erupted. The clash between the fleets was inevitable. The once peaceful galaxy now found itself in the throes of a battle that would determine its future. Ships collided, explosions rocked space, and the deep, resounding thrum of weapons fire echoed throughout the battlefield. Erin watched in horror as the warship's sheer power tore through the ranks of the Alliance's forces. Its advanced weaponry decimated everything in its path. Even the most advanced ships had no chance against the relentless onslaught. The warship moved with terrifying precision, its every action calculated to destroy any threat before it could fully form. But Erin wasn't ready to give up. He ran to the bridge, his mind set on one final attempt to make peace. He would not let this be the end. "Commander, please," Erin shouted as he approached Celine, who stood calmly amidst the chaos. "There's still time. You don't have to destroy them all. There's another way. Please give us a chance to work together." Celine turned to face him, her eyes filled with sadness and understanding. "Lieutenant, I know you don't want this war. I know you want peace. But sometimes peace can only be built through strength. The galaxy's factions have had centuries to prove themselves, and they've failed. Humanity's return is the galaxy's last chance to survive, if they don't accept it now, ... Before she could finish, the ship's sensors went wild. A massive anomaly appeared on the radar, something bigger, darker, and more menacing than anything they had ever seen. A force that had been lying dormant in the galaxy for centuries. The warship was not the only ancient force in the galaxy. Something far worse was coming, and it was ready to consume everything in its path. The galaxy's fate was no longer about humanity's return or the fight for control. It was about survival. The true enemy had revealed itself.